Thank you for joining us for today's Monitoring Student Performance, Checking Initial Placement. In this session, we're going to talk about how to make sure students are in the right level and have the right story goal when they begin working in the program. The final task on the teacher responsibilities list is monitoring student performance. And even though it's the last task, it's actually the task that you spend the most time doing. The whole time that you're in the school year, you'll be taking a look at your students' data and deciding whether or not they're in the right spot. The initial checking of placement should happen after about 3 stories. And when we do that, we want to remember that we need to have our students be challenged. Obviously, students who struggle with reading, the primary objective is to maximize their achievement so that they have a chance of catching up. And if a student is being challenged, they are likely to make greater gains. So we want them in a level that is difficult, but not to the point of frustration. We want them to have a story goal that is reachable, but through effort. We all know that if we have a goal that is very easy, we're not going to work as hard. Whereas if we have a goal that is more challenging, we will put more effort into it so that we can reach it. So whenever we're talking today, I want you to think about the idea that we absolutely need to have our students challenged, but also able to be successful. And we consider that when we're checking initial placement after 3 stories. And then we also consider it in the second phase of data analysis, which is keep the student challenged over time. So checking initial placement happens after 3 stories, whereas that second option happens then the rest of the school year. So if you're at a place where your students have just gotten started and they've passed just a couple stories, that is the ideal place for checking initial placement. We have a feature in Read Naturally Live now that is called Data Mentor. And Data Mentor is a great resource that allows you to, or provides you with some suggestions on whether or not the student is in the right spot. There's checking initial placement suggestions, and there's also keeping students challenged suggestions. Data Mentor can be located on the Pass Review work page. When you are with the student, after you do the pass timing, after you conduct the pass activities, look at their comprehension questions, this is a slide that shows the screenshot of a page that you are sitting with the student when they reach it. You can take note that there is a red dot on the tab that is marked Data Mentor. And that red dot is an indication to the teacher that there is a suggestion in there. If the computer thinks the student has the right level and has the right story goal, there will be no red dot. And under this suggestions and notifications, it will say there are no suggestions at this time. This one says change the story goal. So based on the student's first 3 stories, the data from that, the computer is suggesting to the teacher that they get a slightly more challenging story goal. Checking initial placement is the second phase of our 2-step placement process. When you started working in the program with students, in order for them to begin working in the program, they needed to have content that was available to them at the right level. And to get that, you conducted initial placement. It was the first time you had student data. Now what we're doing is we're taking a look at a little bit more data. In checking initial placement, you're going to have an average from the student's first 3 stories. So you can compare that average to the initial level criteria, and you can compare that average to the initial goal criteria. The place you get the averages is a report that we call the Students at a Glance report. Now, struggling readers are nothing if they are not inconsistent. And so placement day is just one day. It's just 1 or 2 or maybe 3 passages of 1-minute timings. Once your students have passed a few stories, you're going to have more data. And so we create an average. We provide in the Students at a Glance report the series and level the student is working in and the date that the level was started. We also include how many stories have been passed. Ideally, this process happens after 3 stories. That is the best time. So if they've passed 4, it's still a good time. If they've only passed 2 and you want to get it done now, that's okay too. But ideally, you would be right at that 3-story point. Once you start into that first gray section, now you're getting actual data from the student. And in these columns, you're going to see 2 numbers, and those numbers are separated by a forward slash. So here in the cold timing column, you see 41, 41. This is not a fraction. It's actually providing you with 2 separate data points. The first 41 is telling you the average of the student's cold timing scores after the first 3 stories. The second 41 is telling you the average after the most recent 3 stories. And because this student has only passed 3 stories, those numbers are identical because the first 3 stories are the last 3 stories. So that first number is never going to change because the first 3 stories a student passes in the level are always going to be the first 3 stories they passed. But that second number will change. After they've passed 6 stories, now you have a totally different set that the computer's drawing from, right? So the next column over is the story goal. It's the average hot timing score, average expression rating, the average number of practices, the percentage correct on the quiz, words in the retell, or how long it takes to read the word list. So that's all the information that you're being provided in this report. It is a phenomenal report for taking a look at whether or not they're in the right spot to begin with, as well as looking at have they made progress. Because there are going to be 2 numbers in those columns, you can see how easy it would be to compare where they started and where they are now. We do have another webinar on keeping students challenged that deals with that part of progress monitoring, so you can look for that on our website as well. I'm going to pop out of the PowerPoint for just a minute and show you how to run the Students at a Glance report. As a staff member, you would log in to your staff member account with your teacher user ID and password and click the login button. When you are on the home page, you're going to locate the tile that's titled Reports. You can click on the tile or you can select it from the drop-down menu in the upper left corner. After selecting reports, you'll see the first couple tiles are administrative reports, providing you with roster information, password information. The third one in the upper right side is Read Naturally Live reports. So that's where you're going to go because we're talking about data from Read Naturally Live. The very first tile under the Read Naturally Live reports is the Students at a Glance report. Once you click in here, you will get a list of your students. You can select one student, or if you want, you can select a whole group of students. You can do that by holding the Shift key down when you select the bottom student in the list, and then all the students in that range will be selected. After you select the students you want, you click the Generate Reports for Selected. You select the date in this date range box. It does default to the beginning of this school year, so you likely won't need to change that, but if you do need to change it, you can. Then you click Generate Reports. And here I would like to show that you can see this particular student has passed more than 3 stories. This student has passed 7. So now the numbers are different in these columns. The average cold timing score is 82 at story 1, 2, and 3, but on story 5, 6, and 7, the average is now 87. So you can see how nice it is once they've passed more than 3 stories to take a look at whether or not you're seeing growth in those important areas. But for now, in this first phase, we want to make sure they're in the right spot to begin with. So we're actually going to take that average cold timing score and plug it into the placement table. And we're going to basically ask ourselves, if this was placement day, and I knew this number on placement day, would the computer and I still have decided on the level that we decided for this student? Okay, so we're taking a look at fluency. It's not just one data point like it was on placement day. Now we have at least 3 data points. So we have an average number. It's a little more solid of a number. The other thing that is essential is that this is the first time we make sure they're understanding well enough to be in this level. So we need to make sure they understand at least at 60%. Now, 60% is not where we want our students to be for comprehension. Certainly, we want them at 80% or better, of course. But what we're saying with the 60% is that if the student is below 60%, then I need to lower the level. If they are at 60%, they understand well enough that they can make gains there. Research shows that students who understand at least at 60% understand well enough to be able to make gains in comprehension. If they're understanding only at 30 or 40%, it is so hard for them that they're not even really able to make adequate gains. So here's the first time where we took a look at how they're doing on comprehension. And if they're doing 60% or better, we're going to let them keep going. But if they're below that point, then we need to get them in a level that they can understand a little better. So let's take a look at some student data. We're going to talk about a student named Rob, who's a fourth grader, and we're going to look at whether or not he's in the right level. We'll use the Students at a Glance report for Rob, and I'm going to provide that information for you on the screen. So I'm going to ask a series of questions. I'll pause briefly after I ask them, so you can, in your head, think about what the answer to that would be. So the first question is whether or not Rob's average cold timing score is in the range for his placement level. So on this first example, I will use my cursor to indicate the information you need to answer this question. You need to know what level Rob is working in. He is in the Sequence Series level 3.0. Okay. You also need to know what his average cold timing score is. The average cold timing score is in this first column. It's listed at 70. So you would take 3.0 and 70 and plug it into this table. In level 3.0, that's that first row. So is Rob's words correct per minute score in that range? No, it's not. I'm thinking it might be too easy, because if Rob had read 70 words correctly on placement day, the computer would have said 3.0 is too easy, try 3.5. 70 would have indicated that I needed to keep testing. Okay. So right now I'm thinking might be too hard, but I got to make sure the quiz is strong enough to keep going. And it's not just strong enough to keep going. He's doing quite well in comprehension. So the average cold timing score is outside the range on the high end. The quiz is good enough to leave him. What do you think you'd do? Would you leave him in 3.0? Would you raise him to 3.5? Or would you lower him to 2.5? In this case, we're going to raise Rob up to level 3.5. What's going to happen when you get to the Pass Review Work page is you're going to notice that there's a red dot on the Data Mentor tab. So when you're sitting with Rob on that Pass Review Work page, you will click on that Data Mentor tab, and you will see that there is a suggestion to move Rob from 3.0 to 3.5. You will click that Accept button. When you click the Accept button, the change will be applied to the next story. So he'll get to see his medals still on the story he just passed. But when he clicks next after seeing his medals, he will be at a new level. None of the stories are going to be passed because he's not in 3.0 anymore. Now he's in 3.5. When you change a level, the story goal is likely to remain the same. So Rob's story goal is the same, but his level is higher. Okay. So let's take a look at another student, Anna. Anna's a seventh grader. We're going to ask whether or not her cold timing is in the range and how her quiz is. So we need that Students at a Glance report. Anna's the first student on this row, so I'll keep this information on the screen so that you can lean on it. Is Anna's average cold timing score in the range for placement? So you can find it now. Remember, you need to know the level Anna's working in, and you need to know what her average cold timing score is. So take those two pieces of information, plug them into that initial placement range table, and you will see that Anna's smack dab in the middle. If Anna read 90 words on placement, the computer would have said, yep, this is the right level. Go ahead and put her here. So right now I'm thinking she's in the right spot, but I do need to make sure she's understanding well enough. Quiz is over far to the right in that final white section, and she's understanding very well. So her cold timing is in the right range. She's in the range for this placement, indicating it's the right level for her. Her quiz is good enough that I'm not concerned. What would you do with Anna? Would you lower her to 5.0? Would you continue her in 5.6, or would you raise her up to 6.0? In this case, you're going to keep her going in level 5.6. Okay, so her level is right. Her words correct per minute score is in that range. She's understanding well enough. Her level is right. But what about her goal? Because I'm leaving her level the same, I want to take a look at that goal. So I'm going to take a look and see if her average cold timing score is about 40 away from her goal. Notice that this has two different options based on the student's age, not the level they're reading in, but the age of the actual student. Anna's a 7th grader, so I want the difference to be about 40, because that's for 5th grade and above. Younger students, students in 4th grade and below, the difference should be about 30. Okay, so think about what I'm talking. The cold timing, the very first time they read that story, that average score should be about 40 words away for Anna than their goal. The other thing we want to look at is how close the goal and the pass timing score are. We also call that the hot timing score. So we use those words interchangeably. Hopefully it's not too confusing. But if you hear me say pass timing and then hear me say hot timing, I mean the same thing. That final time they read for the teacher. In order to pass a story, the students need to meet their story goal, right? You're not going to pass them unless they can meet their story goal. That's one of the requirements. So their average pass timing, their average hot timing score is going to be at least at the story goal. And it should be, so it'd be at or slightly above. What do I mean by slightly? We think of slightly or being close enough. It is close enough if it's a single digit difference from where it is ideally. If it's a double digit difference, if it's 10 or more words away from where it is ideally, that means a change is necessary. Okay. The final thing we're looking at is how many times the student's practicing. The more the students are stuck on the practice step, they have to continue to practice until they meet their story goal independently. So if at the start of the year, your students were practicing 6 times on average, and now they're only practicing 3 times, it means it's taking them a lot fewer practices to get to the same score. So they're having to work less hard. And so that's an indication a change is needed. So all this information that is written in words is also written here, but in picture format. So if you're somebody who does a little better with pictures, this might be a little more helpful to you. You can see that the cold timing score should be about 30 words away for a young student or 40 words away for an older student. You should see the difference between the hot timing and the goal should be a single digit difference. If it's not, it's an indication that a change is needed. So we're going to ask ourselves those 3 questions. We're going to do it one at a time, and you'll have Anna's data on my screen. So go ahead and look at my screen and ask yourself, does the goal exceed the average cold timing score by about 40? So find the goal. Anna's goal is 120. Her average cold timing score is 90. The difference there is only 30. We want it to be 40, as it says in the question. Anna's a middle school student. We want the difference to be 40. It's only 30. It's 10 away from where it should be. If Anna read 90 words correctly on placement day, the computer would have given her a goal of 130 because the computer would have taken that placement score and added 40 as a middle schooler. So right now I'm thinking that goal maybe is a little easy. But let's ask ourselves the second question, the difference between the hot timing and the goal. We want it to be a single digit difference in order for them to continue in this level. If it's not a single digit difference, it's an indication a change is likely needed. So in this case, her average hot timing score is 132 and her goal is 120. That's a 12-word difference. So again, I'm thinking it's maybe a little easy. Maybe she can handle a little higher goal. Practices are found in the final column of the gray section, and she's practicing between 3 and 10 times, so that's right. So of the 3 questions, twice, 2 of the 3, so 67% of the time I'm thinking that no, she needs something harder. But what would you do? Would you continue Anna with the goal? Would you raise her to a higher goal? Or would you lower her to a lower goal? Anna's goal is too low, so you're going to raise her to 130. And Data Mentor will provide that the suggestion for you. On that pass review work page, there'll be a red dot on the Data Mentor tab. When you click on it, there will be a suggestion under the suggestion notification section at the bottom. Notice to the right of that, there is a section that says explanation. This is helpful to teachers so that they can see why that's happening. The computer does a good job of giving pretty decent suggestions, but it is not as good as you are. It doesn't know as much about your students as you do. So you need to understand the process so you can decide whether or not you want to accept the suggestion. If you think, I'm not going to accept the suggestion, I don't think that she's quite ready. Her ego is still really low. She's having a hard time being confident. I'm going to leave her there. That's okay. You just ignore it. Okay. So if you ignore the suggestion, what will happen is the next time they pass, the suggestion might be different because it will update based on the most current data. So if you ignore a suggestion, you're not going to have a big running list of a whole bunch of suggestions. You're always going to have the most current suggestion in there. Okay. In this case, I would likely click the accept button, and then Anna would remain in level 5.6. So you can see on my slide, 3 of the stories have been passed because she's staying in that level. But now her story goal is no longer 120. Now it's 130. Okay, so we're increasing the challenge a little bit, but leaving her with the same level of content. All right, we have one more student that we're going to talk about today, Lee. Lee is a 3rd grader. We're going to pull Lee's data from the exact same place we pulled Rob and Anna, that Students at a Glance report, and I will keep that information on my screen so that you can answer the following questions. The first one, we're looking at level. So we're plugging into that initial placement table. So take a look at the report that's on the bottom of my slide and answer the question, is the average hold timing score in the range for placement? So you see which level he's working in. You see what his average cold timing score, you take that information from that report and you plug it into that placement table, and you will see that at 41 words correct per minute, level 2.5, that's right within the range. So if Lee had read 41 words correct per minute on placement day, the computer would have said, yep, this is the right level. Select the option. You don't need to continue testing. Okay. So let's take a look at his quiz. Is he doing well enough to stay there? Is he at least at 60%? You bet, he's at 87%. So he's actually doing pretty well. His average cold timing score is right in the range. His quiz is at least at 60%. So do you want to lower Lee to a lower level? Do you want to raise him to a higher one? Or do you want to continue him in level 2.5? In this case, the right answer is to continue him in level 2.5. Now, sometimes I get a little pushback on this, and some teachers will say, well, yeah, but he's doing so well on the quiz. I mean, he's understanding almost at 90%. I think he could handle a little harder stuff. But I want you to remember his cold timing score. This is place him on fluency. We're glad he's understanding well, but he's only reading 41 words correct per minute. That is a very slow, that is hard. We don't want to make the words harder yet. He's not automatic enough with the words at this level for him to be ready to take on more challenging words. Okay, so we're going to leave him here. We're going to take a look at goal and make sure that that's not an adjustment that we could make. Okay, so with the goal criteria, we ask about relationships and numbers. The first question we ask is, does the goal exceed the average cold timing by about 30? The goal is 70. His average cold timing is 41. That's 29. That's right on the nose, about, not right on the nose, but about as close as you can get. So this is indicating to me that this is the right goal. The first question does anyway. Because what the placement does is it takes, for a 3rd grade student, it takes their cold timing on the placement test and it adds 30, and then it rounds down to the nearest 5. So if he read 41 words correctly on placement day, the computer would have given him that goal. What about the difference between his goal and his hot timing? His hot timing on average is 74 words correct per minute, and his goal is 70. It's a difference of 4. That is a single digit difference. That makes me think that his goal is right. He's practicing 6 times, so he has to work hard to get there, and he's not blowing his goal out of the water, right? He's just a little bit above it. So I have yeses all the way down the column. So would you want to raise his level, or I'm sorry, would you want to raise his goal, leave his goal the same, or lower his goal? In this case, Lee's goal is appropriate. So you're going to continue his goal at 70 words correct per minute. Okay. So this is what the pass review work page looks like when there is not a data mentor suggestion. The data mentor tab is still there, but notice there's no red dot next to it. It just looks like all the other tabs. So if you click on it, when there's no red dot, what you are told in that suggestion/notification based on recent performance section, that section that's in red or that's circled in red, what that says is Data Mentor does not have any suggestions at this time. So it's still providing you with information. So clicking on that tab will let you know, nope, it seems to be good. If you disagree with it, you can make a change still, but Data Mentor does not believe he needs one at this point. So that's one of the places that you can look. The other place that you can look that you don't have to wait until the pass review work page is this teacher button. The teacher button in the upper right-hand corner of the student screen is on every single student screen. So if you think, oh gosh, I didn't know anything about Data Mentor, and I don't want to wait to the pass review work page, I want to see if some of my students have suggestions in there. Well, at any point when the student's working, you can come to their computer and click this teacher button. When you click that teacher button, it will prompt you to enter your login information, and you are brought to the teacher menu. 3 items down on the teacher menu is the Data Mentor section. And here you can say, it says Data Mentor does not have any suggestions at this time. If you believed that a change needed to be made, you could come right down to below Data Mentor where it says change series level and goal, and you can make the change there, even if Data Mentor doesn't suggest it. But it does do a pretty good job. So more often than not, you're likely to follow the suggestion in there, at least in my experience. So Lee was in the right level and Lee had the right story goal. We don't need to make any changes. During this checking initial placement webinar, we talked about a student who needed a different level. We talked about a student who needed a different story goal, and we talked about a student who was in the right spot. And those are kind of the three different things that can happen. And ideally, again, that would be after checking initial placement usually happens after about 3 stories. Please know that we do have a lot of training resources on our website. We have a great training page, and we also have a lot of wonderful help resources on our readlive.com/read-live-help. So if you go to our website, our company website of readnaturally.com, you can locate our help page. And please reach out to us. Thank you for attending this today. Thank you for everything you do for your struggling readers. You are there to support your students, and we are here to support you so you can do that. So our phone number and our email is listed on this slide. It's also listed in many places on our website. So please call us, email us. You get an actual person if you call during business hours, and we are happy to help you. Thank you very much for your time today, and have a wonderful afternoon.